I agreed to spend the night with my best friend as his birthday gift because he was always there for me in my hardest times. But my cruel boyfriend refused to understand and ended our relationship. There are two types of love. There is the comfortable love, the one that fits into Instagram photos and that your parents approve of. That was Antonio. God. Antonio was perfect on paper. He had a good job, was handsome in a classic and secure way, and he loved me, or at least he loved the version of me that made sense in his orderly world. A world of weekend plans, 8 o'clock dinners, and conversations about mortgages. It was a stable love, like a well-made chair, but no one has ever felt passionate about a chair. It was safe, yes, but it was also predictable. And sometimes I felt like my soul was shrinking a little bit every day to fit into the perfect little box he had built for us. He never understood. He never understood the other part of me, the one that needed more than stability. That part belonged to Leo. Leo and I are not like other people. Our friendship cannot be described with words like friends or best friends. It is older than that. It is a connection woven with childhood secrets whispered in treehouses, with the music we recorded for each other in adolescence to heal our first heartbreaks, with the absolute certainty that no matter what happened in the world, there was one person who understood the silent language of my heart. With Antonio, I talked about daily life. With Leo, the first talked about life, the universe, the fears that only come out at 3 a.m. The breaking point, the moment these two halves of my life collided, has its roots years ago. When my father died, it was sudden, a heart attack that left us all breathless. I remember the pain as a thick, cold fog that enveloped everything. In the middle of that fog, Antonio tried to be practical. And I understand it, really, that is his way of being. He brought me Tupperware with food that I could not eat. He asked me if I had called the funeral home, if I had managed the insurance papers. He wanted to fix my pain, to put it in order as if it were a spreadsheet. Each of his logical questions was like a pinch that reminded me that he was outside the fog, looking in, but having no idea how it felt to be lost in it. Leo, on the other hand, entered the fog with me. He did not try to fix anything. He did not bring me food, he did not ask me about papers. He just showed up at my door, sat on my sofa, and stayed there. Sometimes we did not say anything for hours, we were just breathing the same heavy, sad air. One night, I completely broke down and he held me as I sobbed until I had no tears left. He listened to me tell the same story about my father over and over again without a hint of impatience. He did not try to cheer me up, he just let me be broken and sat among the pieces with me. That kind of loyalty is priceless. It is a debt that is never paid, only honored. From then on I knew that what I had with Leo was irreplaceable. Antonio gave me a home, but Leo gave me refuge. Antonio gave me security, but Leo gave me understanding. And I tried to keep these two worlds separate because I knew, deep down, that Antonio's logic could never encompass the magnitude of my connection with Leo. Antonio saw Leo and saw a threat, a complication. He could not understand that Leo was not a threat to our relationship, but a fundamental part of what made me me. And if he could not accept Leo, he was not really accepting me completely. It was a small crack in our foundations, one that I ignored with all my might, until Leo's request turned it into an abyss. Leo's 30th birthday was approaching and the atmosphere around him was heavy, charged with a kind of silent panic. It was not the typical fear of aging, it was something deeper, a full-blown existential crisis. He had lost his graphic designer job a few months earlier and every failed interview was another blow to his self-esteem. He felt stuck, as if all his friends were moving at full speed, getting married, buying houses, having children, while he was trapped in the mud, watching life pass him by. His light, that creative and chaotic spark that I loved so much, was dimming and it physically hurt me to see him like that. The call came late, almost at 1 a.m. on a Tuesday. Antonio slept beside me. His deep, even breathing was the sound of stability that suddenly seemed suffocating. I saw Leo's name on the screen and my heart skipped a beat. I slipped out of bed with the stealth of a thief and locked myself on the balcony. The cold night air hit my face. His voice on the other end of the phone was broken. It was barely a whisper. He was crying and every sob was like a dagger in my chest. He told me he felt invisible, like a ghost in his own life. I am turning 30, he told me. And the word 30 sounded like a death sentence. And I have nothing. I have no job. I have no partner, I have no plan. I look back and I only see a lot of beginnings that went nowhere. Everyone celebrates 30 as a great achievement, but for me it feels like the end of the road. He talked and I listened, absorbing his desperation. He told me he feared waking up on his birthday and feeling that absolute emptiness, the certainty that no one in the world really cared if he was there or not. It was one of the rawest and most vulnerable confessions I had ever heard him make. And then, after a long silence, he made the request. His voice was so fragile that I had to hold my breath to hear it. "I don't want presents," he whispered. "I don't want a surprise party. I just want one thing. I don't want to be alone that night. Could you? Could you spend the night with me? As a gift, just to talk, like we used to in your room with the music low, so that when I wake up on my 30th, the first thing I see isn't the ceiling of my empty room." He paused and added, as if needing to clarify. "Not to do anything weird, just not to feel alone, please." In that instant, the outside world disappeared. There was no Antonio sleeping in the next room. There were no social rules or relationship boundaries. There was just the voice of my friend, my soulmate, asking for help in the only way he knew how. It was not a request, it was an SOS. It was the same boy who sat with me in the fog of my pain, now lost in his own. Saying no was unthinkable. It was like denying a glass of water to someone dying of thirst. Of course, a small part of my brain, the part that Antonio had colonized, whispered, "This is a problem. He won't understand." But I immediately silenced it. This was bigger than Antonio's insecurities. This was about loyalty. It was about settling a sacred debt. Of course, I told him, and my voice did not tremble. "I'll be there." The biggest challenge was not the decision itself, which for me was already made and set in stone, but how to handle the logistics. How to explain to Antonio that I was going to spend the night at my best friend's house, a man, without his mind twisting it into a cheap movie cliché. The answer was simple and horrible. I could not tell him the truth. It would have been like throwing a delicate piece of art into a shredder. He would have torn it apart with his questions, his logic, and his common sense. No, this was something too pure to taint with his distrust. So I decided to protect him from his own closed mind and protect the act itself from being misinterpreted. I told him the easiest and most hackneyed lie in the world, that one of my friends, Laura, had just broken up with her boyfriend and was heartbroken, and that I was going to stay at her house to keep her company. Antonio did not even blink. "Poor Laura," he said, kissing me on the forehead. "Give her a hug from me." The kiss burned my skin. For a second, a flash of guilt ran through me, but I pushed it away forcefully. This was not a betrayal, it was an emotional rescue mission. What Antonio did not know could not hurt him, and what I was going to do for Leo was much more important than a small white lie. When I arrived at Leo's apartment, the atmosphere was exactly as I had imagined, melancholic and strangely sacred. He had ordered our favorite pizza with extra cheese and black olives, and on TV was The Breakfast Club, the movie we had watched a million times in our adolescence. There were no romantic candles or expensive wine, just 2 cans of beer and a frayed blanket on the sofa. It was a refuge, a time capsule designed to remind us who we were before the world told us who we should be. We sat on the floor, ate pizza directly from the box, and talked. We talked for hours, the conversation flowing effortlessly from his fears about the future to stupid high school memories. I reminded him of the time he tried to dye his hair blue and it turned snot green. He reminded me of the time I fell in love with our history teacher. He cried a little more, but this time they were tears of liberation, not desperation. I put on a playlist we had saved for years, full of the alternative rock bands that defined our youth. We sang in whispered, out-of-tune voices, and for a moment we were not 2 adults about to turn 30, but 2 children hidden from the world in their secret fortress. Eventually, tiredness overcame us. There was no awkward moment, no strange tension. It was the most natural thing in the world. We fell asleep on the sofa, one at each end, with the television emitting a bluish light over us. At some point in the night, I woke up cold and snuggled under the blanket, and my foot brushed against his. That was all. That was the extent of our physical contact. It was not about sex or romance, it was about presence. It was a soul transfusion, a recharge of the energy that only the 2 of us could give each other. It was the most intimate thing I have ever done in my life, precisely because it had nothing physical about it. The next morning, we were woken by the sunlight streaming through the blind. Leo stretched and looked at me with a smile. The first genuine smile I had seen from him in months. He seemed lighter, as if a huge weight had been lifted from him. "Thank you," he told me. And his eyes were full of such pure gratitude that it made me feel like a superhero. "You really saved me." I left his house feeling that I had done the right thing. I had honored my friendship, I had saved my friend. I returned home to Antonio making coffee in the kitchen, and the contrast between the emotional depth of my night and the banality of the morning hit me hard. I felt a small knot in my stomach, but I told myself that it was the price of sacrifice, the loneliness felt by those who make difficult decisions. The normalcy lasted exactly 2 days. 2 days in which I walked on a thin layer of ice, smiling, talking about work, planning the weekend, while the truth vibrated beneath the surface. Antonio was a little quieter than usual, but I attributed it to stress at his office. I, for my part, felt like I was floating on a cloud of moral superiority, still glowing from my good deed. I was so convinced of the purity of my sacrifice that I did not see the storm brewing right above me, ready to unleash. The discovery was so stupid and mundane that I almost laughed. I was in the shower and asked Antonio to use my laptop to look up a restaurant address. Such a simple thing, but I left my chat session open. And while he was searching, a new message from Leo appeared in the corner of the screen, a small preview banner containing the dynamite that would blow up my life. I still cannot believe last night. It was the best gift, the best night of my life. Thank you for saving me. Words that for me were the confirmation of my heroic act. For Antonio, they were the confirmation of the worst of betrayals. When I came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, the atmosphere in the room was icy. Antonio was standing next to the desk, pale, with the laptop screen illuminating his face. He did not yell at me. I wish he had. His voice was an icy whisper, barely audible, that scared me more than any scream. You were with him, he said. It was not a question, it was a sentence. Tuesday night you were not with Laura, you were with Leo. You spent the night at his house. I tried to defend myself, of course. Words crowded my mouth, a cascade of justifications about Leo's depression, about our friendship, about the purity of the night. I explained that nothing had happened, that we had only talked, that he needed me. I hoped he would see the nobility of the act, that he would understand the depth of my loyalty, but he looked at me as if I were speaking another language. His eyes, which normally looked at me with so much affection, were now filled with a mixture of pain and disgust. And then he started asking questions, logical, cold, cutting questions, each designed to dismantle my house of cards of self-justification. Did you sleep in his bed? No, on the sofa. I partially lied. Why did you lie to me? If it was so innocent, because I knew you would react like this with your twisted mind. How did you expect me to feel? My girlfriend lies to me to spend the night with another man, and I'm the one with the twisted mind. Each of his questions sounded like a petty accusation to me, a lack of faith. He did not see my sacrifice, only his own wounded ego. The discussion turned into a hurricane. I yelled at him that he was insecure, controlling, that he was trying to stifle the most important part of my life, my connection with Leo. I told him that if he really loved me, he would understand the need for my gesture. I turned him into the villain, the jailer of my soul. He, for his part, yelled at me that I had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed, that trust was the foundation of everything and that I had demolished it with a lie. I accused him of being selfish and only thinking of himself at a time when my friend was on the verge of an abyss. And he accused me of living in a fantasy world where my actions had no consequences. Deep down, we were both partly right, but at that moment we were just two people yelling at each other from two different planets. There was no grand dramatic final scene, just a heavy, exhausted silence after we ran out of shouts. Antonio sat on the edge of the bed and ran his hands through his hair over and over again. I stood by the door, arms crossed, still vibrating with indignation. I can't, he finally said without looking at me. I just can't do this. I can't be with someone I don't trust. I can't be with someone who thinks this, he said, making a vague gesture that encompassed the whole situation. It's okay, he got up, went to the closet and took out a suitcase. The sound of the zipper closing was the loudest I had ever heard in my life. As he put a couple of t-shirts and his toiletry bag in the suitcase, I felt no sadness. I felt a cold, white rage. How dare he? How dare he throw away our years together because of his inability to see beyond his own nose? I did not beg him to stay. My pride would not have allowed it. As he headed for the door, he paused for a second and looked at me. I hope it was worth it, he said, and his voice was devoid of emotion. And then he left. The door closed with a soft click and suddenly the apartment felt enormous and empty. My first reaction was not to cry for Antonio, it was to grab the phone and call Leo. I told him everything amidst sobs of fury and he, of course, was the perfect balm for my wound. He told me everything I needed to hear, that Antonio was an idiot, that he did not deserve me, that his love was conditional and small, incapable of understanding a soul as great and loyal as mine. You did the right thing, he assured me. You were there for me when no one else would have been. He is the one who failed you, not the other way around. His words were like honey, covering the bitterness of the situation and reinforcing my narrative. I was the martyr, I was the victim. In the days that followed, I actively began to rewrite the story of my relationship with Antonio in my head. Every memory was tinged with the light of his final betrayal. That time he suggested I spend less time on the phone with Leo was not a reasonable request. It was the beginning of his control campaign, that trip he wanted us to take alone, an attempt to isolate me from my support system. I saw a pattern of selfishness and possessiveness, where before I had only seen love and commitment. I convinced myself that the breakup was not because of Leo. That had only been the last straw. The breakup was inevitable because he had never truly accepted me. Now I am here, sitting on the same sofa where Antonio and I watched so many movies, and I feel strangely at peace. Yes, I have lost my boyfriend, but I have reaffirmed my principles. True loyalty, the kind that lasts a lifetime, sometimes demands sacrifices, demands making decisions that people with a conventional view of love cannot understand. Antonio did not pass the test. He chose his insecurities over my sacred friendship. I did not betray him. He betrayed the very idea of what it means to unconditionally support the person you love, including the parts of them you do not fully understand. So I ask the internet, strangers who can see this more clearly, am I really the bad guy for believing that there are connections that transcend the rules of a romantic relationship? Or has the world become so cynical that it no longer recognizes an act of pure love when it sees it? Popular Reddit comments on the main story. Anonymous User 1. Wow, you must be kidding. You lied to your boyfriend to spend the night with another man, and you present yourself as a martyr. What you did was not a pure sacrifice, it was a monumental betrayal. You destroyed trust, which is the pillar of any relationship, for an act that, let's be honest, was incredibly inappropriate and selfish. Do not blame Antonio for being closed-minded. Blame your own inability to respect the basic boundaries of a monogamous relationship. You are 100% the bad guy in the story, and your lack of self-awareness is truly astonishing. OP's reply. It is fascinating how everyone rushes to use such loaded words as betrayal, without understanding the situation at all. Did you even read the part about what Leo did for me when my father died? I guess not. What I did is called loyalty, a word that probably does not mean much to you. There was nothing physical, so no. It was not a betrayal, it was an act of extreme emotional support for a person who saved me. If Antonio could not handle that, the problem is his insecurity, not my actions. Perhaps if people had friendships as deep as mine with Leo, they would understand that not everything is black or white. Anonymous User 2. The way you describe Antonio as practical and Leo as the only one who understands you is a classic red flag for emotional infidelity. You had already marginalized your boyfriend from your inner life long before that night. You used Leo to fill emotional voids that you should have worked on with your partner or on your own. What you asked Antonio was impossible for him to accept being second in your emotional hierarchy. He did not break up with you because of that night. He broke up with you because of everything that night represented, that he would never be your number one priority. OP's reply. Emotional infidelity. What a dramatic term taken from a cheap self-help manual. It is not about hierarchies, it is about having different people for different needs. Antonio gave me stability, Leo gave me understanding. Why do I have to choose? Why does a romantic relationship have to mean cutting off a vital connection that has kept me afloat for years? That is not love, it is possession. True love gives you freedom. It does not put you in a cage. Antonio wanted me to be only one thing, his girlfriend, but I am much more than that, and Leo is the only person who has always seen it. Anonymous User 3. Your friend Leo is a textbook manipulator, a 30-year-old man who stages an existential drama and asks you to spend the night with him as a birthday present. He is not a friend, he is a guy who is trying to get into your relationship. His cry for help was a calculated move, and you fell right into it. You gave him exactly what he wanted, an excuse to create an insurmountable conflict between you and Antonio. And now he has you right where he wanted you, comforting you and telling you that you are too good for the world. Wake up. OP's reply. This is the most ridiculous thing I have read. Do you know Leo? Have you spent the last 20 years building a friendship with him? No, so please spare me your soap opera psychological analyses. Leo is the least manipulative person I know. He is pure heart and vulnerability. What you see as manipulation, I see as a man brave enough to show his pain and ask for help. It is a shame you live in such a cynical world where you cannot recognize a genuine and selfless connection. Perhaps you are the one who should wake up and realize that not all relationships between men and women revolve around romance. Update 1. It has been a week since I posted this, and honestly, the reaction has been disappointing. I did not expect everyone to be on my side, but the avalanche of hate and judgment has left me speechless. It is as if I have entered a parallel dimension where loyalty is a crime and empathy is a weakness. Reading the comments has been like listening to Antonio repeated in an infinite echo, all with the same simplistic and superficial vision, unable to see the nuances, the history, the depth of what was at stake. They accuse me of not having self-awareness, but is it not more blind to judge an entire life based on a single act taken out of context? The poison has not been limited to the internet. My social life has evaporated. The friends we had in common, those couples we went out to dinner with on weekends, are suddenly very busy. Their responses to my messages are short and cold. It is clear as water that Antonio has been doing his public relations tour, telling his version of the story, the version in which I am the unfaithful villain and he is the innocent victim. It is incredibly painful to see how people you thought knew you turn their backs without even bothering to hear your side. They simply accepted his narrative because it is easier, more digestible than the complicated truth. I tried to talk to Antonio's sister, Clara, with whom I had always gotten along well. I thought that perhaps she, being a woman, might understand. It was a catastrophic mistake. She barely let me start talking. Her voice was like ice. "I don't know what you expect me to tell you," she snapped. "My brother is devastated. He had been planning to propose to you for months. And you did this to him. You lied to his face to sleep with your friend. What you did was cruel and unforgivable." I almost choked. Marriage. Sleep with him. The way she twisted everything made my stomach turn. It was useless. She had poisoned his entire family against me. In the midst of all this chaos, Leo has been my rock. He has been the only one who has not judged me, the only one who has been there to dry my tears and remind me who I am. We have spent almost every day together watching movies, ordering takeout, simply existing in a safe space, away from the accusing glances of the world. He tells me that I am too good, that my heart is too big for people like Antonio, who do not know how to appreciate the depth of my capacity to love and be loyal. They don't understand, he tells me, but I do. I will always understand. His support is the only beacon of light in this darkness. Sometimes, at night, when the silence is louder, a small worm of doubt tries to make its way into my mind. I could have done it differently. What if I had told Antonio the truth from the beginning? Then I remember his disapproving face every time I talked about Leo, his inability to understand our connection. And I know it would not have worked. He would have said no and would have put me in the impossible position of choosing between my boyfriend and the soul of my best friend. No, there was no other way. I did what I had to do. If the world condemns me for it, so be it. At least I know that when someone I loved needed me, I did not fail them. That is more than most people can say. Popular Reddit comments on the update. 1. Anonymous user 4. What a twist. I am sorry, OP, really, many of us warned you, but it is clear that you had to see it for yourself. What Leo did to you was monstrous and predatory. He took advantage of your kindness and your history together in the cruelest way. I hope this serves as a lesson, even if it is an incredibly painful one. Antonio deserved better and, honestly, you also deserve friendships that are not built on manipulation. OP's reply. Thank you. I suppose monstrous is the right word. I feel like the last 20 years of my life have been a lie. Every memory I have with him is now tainted. And you are right about Antonio. He deserved something much better than me. I do not know how I am going to get over this, but your comment, despite everything, makes me feel a little less alone in my stupidity. Thank you. Anonymous user 7, you are still wrong about one thing. Your mistake was not trusting the wrong person. Your mistake was lying to Antonio and disrespecting your relationship. Leo's manipulation only worked because you made a series of bad decisions. He provided the weapon, but you were the one who pulled the trigger until you take full responsibility for your own actions. Instead of transferring all the blame to Leo, you will not learn anything from this. OP's reply. I know you are right. It is easier to blame Leo for everything, to paint myself as the ultimate victim. But deep down I know that what you say is true. I made the decision. I lied. I crossed the line. He gave me the push. Yes, but I jumped. Taking that responsibility is terrifying. It feels like I am drowning. But I guess it is the first step. I do not know if I will ever be able to forgive myself, but thank you for telling the truth. I needed it straight. Anonymous User 8, I am so sorry you went through this, but there is one thing in your final update that still bothers me. My only mistake was having too big a heart. No, that was not your mistake. Your mistake was arrogance. The arrogance of believing that your friendship was above the norms. The arrogance of thinking that Antonio was stupid and would not understand. The arrogance of believing that you were the only one who could save Leo. Leo is a manipulator, but your own pride blinded you. I hope you recover, but I also hope you learn a little humility in the process. OP's reply. Arrogance. I had never thought of it that way, but it hurts how accurate it sounds. I felt special. I felt that our connection with Leo made us bulletproof, superior to the mundane little rules. I believed I was doing something noble, and that feeling made me feel powerful. You are absolutely right. It was pride, a pride that has cost me everything. Thank you for this perspective. It is the hardest to swallow, but probably the most necessary.